Finding quality long-term newcomer tenants is not impossible. However, there are challenges in the rental process that hinder them from leasing up. Hello, my name is Lynette Pearl, and I am the Senior Associate of Housing with Refugee Housing Solutions. And in this webinar, landlords and property managers will learn the benefits of renting to newcomers and what operational methods they can adapt to make their property refugee-friendly. The agenda for this webinar will include a brief overview of Refugee Housing Solutions, the benefits of renting to newcomers and refugees, and what operational practices a housing provider can adapt to make the rental process newcomer friendly. So who we are. Refugee Housing Solutions was created to bring housing experts, property owners, key stakeholders, and those working in the refugee resettlement space together in order to discuss best practices and innovative solutions that will increase housing opportunities for newcomers. We are a project of church world service funded by the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, which is known as PRM. With this funding, we're able to provide resources, trainings, and webinars such as this, and one-on-one technical support to the 9 resettlement agencies and the 800 affiliates throughout the United States. We also provide services and support to landlords, housing providers, sponsors, and volunteers. Since collaboration and partnerships are vital to addressing this housing crisis, we have initiated a national housing working group and regional communities practice. The National Housing Working Group and Regional Community Practice provide stakeholders a space to share best practices to create innovative housing opportunities for newcomers. If you go to our website, you can see when the next Regional Community Practice is in your region. Our goals is to develop housing resources, provide technical assistance on housing, collaborate and create innovative housing solutions in order to increase capacity to resettle more newcomers. Our website you will find is a one-stop shop housing resource for not just resettlement agencies, but also for landlords, property managers, volunteers, community members, newcomers, and refugees. So simply go to www.refugeehousing.org to check out our one-stop shop website. Our housing technical assistance. Our on-demand technical assistance not only provides ongoing support to resettlement practitioners seeking quality housing for newcomers, but also to landlords and housing providers who want to understand the resettlement process in order to become a landlord or provider for a housing provider for a newcomer or refugee. Our technical assistance topics consist of understanding the housing crisis, refugee resettlement in the United States, strategies for developing community partnerships to increase housing resources, housing advocacy and opportunities for involvement, public housing, housing subsidies available to refugees and newcomers, and frequently asked questions that landlords had in regard to renting to refugees and newcomers. To schedule an appointment with one of our team members, you would just simply enter your contact information and details of your TA request into our booking schedule system. Virtual office hours are held every Monday, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Wednesday from 9:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Times, with 20 minutes being allocated to each appointment. If you have questions and you're not ready to book a session yet, feel free to fill out our TA form to get in touch with one of our team members. The goal is to return your inquiry within 2 business days. Our resource library provides information not only for resettlement practitioners, but also for landlords, housing providers, newcomers, refugees, resettlement sponsors, and volunteers. So as a landlord, we do have a landlord toolkit we'll be uploading. So that would be part of the resources. If you miss any of our trainings or webinars, feel free to go to our resource library to check out previous trainings as well. As a landlord or housing provider, your livelihood is tied to the success of your tenant's rental tenure. So at least one of your primary objectives is to rent your property to responsible long-term tenants. So the question is, from a landlord perspective, why rent to refugees or other newcomers to the US? And what are the benefits? Well, there's a lot of benefits. The benefits of renting to newcomers and refugees are they are the most vetted people arriving in the US from other countries. They are interviewed, screened for health and education, they're reference checked, and then documented as qualified to come to the US. After this, they participate in cross-cultural education and trainings with various resettlement organizations, including US Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, before arriving in the US. They receive official identity documents, social security cards, and photo identification, and have access to additional government identification issued by the US Customs Border Protection, CBP, and USCIS if needed. All refugees and newcomers are expected to work if able and have documentation required to do so legally. They receive case management support, financial assistance, job interview preparation, and employment leads and support through local social service and resettlement agencies. Depending on their legal designation when coming to the US, newcomers have access to these services for a minimum of 30 days and up to 5 years. So they receive a lot of support and wraparound services. Because they seek stability in their new lives, and as such, they're often long-term tenants. That's a benefit. They prove themselves as hardworking community members, eager to build positive, productive new lives for their families and contribute to their new communities. So let's talk about the operational practices, things that you can implement to make your property more newcomer friendly. Having a property that's newcomer friendly, it is an ongoing process and requires adjusting certain things in your screening, application, move-in, and rental processes. So let's talk about your screening process. One of the biggest barriers newcomers and refugees face when trying to rent an apartment is you as a landlord or property management company, there's certain documentations that you rely on that newcomers and refugees do not typically have access to determine eligibility. To overcome this barrier, alternative documentation during the tenant screening process need to be adapted. Let's look at the main criteria that you look at. The main criteria during the application process is providing proof of identity. You look at the ability to pay, and do they have an acceptable, if an applicant has an acceptable criminal and rental history. So with the proof of identity, a newcomer receives their social security card soon after arrival, along with photo identification. So the government identification in the form of a I-94 is issued by the US Customs and Border Protection and US Citizen and Immigration Services, which provides proof of their identity. Ability to pay. Although a newcomer doesn't have a credit history in the United States, local resettlement offices provide a promissory note detailing the financial assistance they will receive. So they'll meet the criteria, ability to pay. The criminal history. As I stated earlier, one of the benefits of renting to a newcomer is they are the most vetted population in the United States. Newcomers and refugees come to the US seeking asylum, and they do not have a rental history. So to overcome this barrier, a letter of support from the resettlement agency can be an acceptable substitution for the rental history or for the rental reference that you're needing for your screening process. If you have any concerns about accepting the mentioned alternative documentation in your screening process, and if they align with the fair housing laws, please contact your legal department and your local fair housing agency to make sure that you're in compliance. So let's talk about your application process. One of the things that you can do to make it refugee and newcomer friendly is offer paper applications. There are reasons online rental applications can be better than paper. Of course, they're widely accessible and quicker to process. However, they favor people with access to the internet who are computer literate and English proficient. So in providing a paper application option, you allow different pool of applicants to apply and enable refugees and other newcomers to ask questions during the application process if you're accepting them in person when clarity is needed. Also, with the paper application, there are things you need to consider in order to maintain the integrity of the application and screening process. The Fair Housing Act makes it imperative that there are no difference in treatment with potential applicants during the application and interview process. So if a paper application is offered to a refugee or newcomer as a courtesy, it must be provided to all applicants, not just a few. And your interview techniques and screening questions should be consistent and uniform for all potential applicants, just FYI. Also, when accepting paper applications, take care to be sure that they are legible and complete. As landlords and housing providers, you know, incomplete and unreadable application causes delays or misunderstandings of information, providing thus generating a wrong decision when you're trying to decide to move on with the application. So those are some things that you need to consider if you're going to take a paper application. So another thing, the primary objective of a landlord is to find and lease up a reliable tenant. In order to do that, you're going to need effective communication is key to a good tenant and landlord relationship. So offering translating support makes your operations more refugee friendly. If a newcomer has an issue understanding the application and the leasing process due to language, then special accommodations should be made. Under the fair housing laws, it is illegal to discriminate against an applicant based on race, color, national origin, or English proficiency, which is related to national origin. FYI, all housing providers receiving federal assistance must comply with the Civil Rights Act to ensure applicants and tenants with limited English proficiency have access to programs and activities, which means providing interpreters and translation services or documents, i.e. applications and leases when needed. If you need additional support in this area for compliance, refer to your legal department and the U.S. Department of Housing and Development, HUD. So what are the types of translation support you can offer? During the application process, if you feel comfortable and if the newcomer cannot understand due to a language barrier with their consent, you can allow them to utilize either a family member, a trusted friend, a resettlement staff member, a sponsor, or a volunteer as an interpreter. But because a lease, again, is a legal binding contract, it is recommended that I would not use anyone under the age of 18 as an interpreter. There are also other translation support you can use. Written translation communications by providing a refugee or newcomer with documentation in their language. I know that could be a lot. Landlords share an essential resource that helps newcomer tenants understand their legal rights and responsibility. A translated document avoids the risk of spoken communication, which will likely be impossible to translate or transcribe sometimes. A written document also helps ensure that important details are not missed or misunderstood due to language barriers. By having information, a written document also allows a point of reference when a non-English speaking applicant double checks the interview outcomes with a resettlement agency or staff member or other English speaker, but also helps as a point of reference to you as well as a landlord and a property manager. One of the things I want to go over is sometimes a landlord or housing provider may have a misconception that a newcomer or refugee has legal grounds to terminate a lease due to not understanding the terms. A lease is a legal binding if it meets the state's requirement for a valid contract. So that's why it's imperative that a newcomer and refugee have appropriate translation services and options before signing a lease. So let's talk about a few options you can use. As a landlord and a housing provider, if you have a small portfolio, I recommend using the services of a nonprofit immigrant-focused organization to assist with interpreter services. And if you're a larger entity, property management company, I would say invest in hiring an interpreter when needed. You can also use translation applications like Google Translate, iTranslate. Again, these are not perfect, but that's just a tool you can use. They're suitable when a newcomer or refugee does speak English, but they need a clarity on certain words or clarity on certain things. So again, the translation application apps are not perfect, but this is just a tool you can use. And as mentioned again earlier, with the consent of the applicant, using a family member, trusted friend, resettlement staff, sponsor, or volunteer as an interpreter. Let's talk about having a orientation. Because the U.S. rental process is new to newcomers and refugees, it would be beneficial for you as a housing provider to offer an orientation during the move-in process. Part of that could be review the lease again, explain and highlight things in the lease that are very important, such as notice to vacate, when rent is due, how to pay the rent, when late charges occur. You can also highlight how to do a work order and the emergency contact information, who to contact during emergency. Once a newcomer or refugee signs a lease, they may have appliances and amenities with which they are unfamiliar. Not all, but some, so just FYI. Perhaps they have some livable habits that are not safe for US apartment living. For example, they may need to be reminded that the oven should not be used for added heating during the winter. So to help tenants make their living situation safe, demonstrate appliances use, and then also leave written instructions as a reminder of how to use the appliances. I also recommend for the safety, partnering up with your local fire department or with the American Red Cross to provide additional safety training for your tenants. Take the time to orientate your new tenants to their new neighborhood, review what types of shops, amenities that are nearby, what type of resources. If you want to provide like a sheet of areas of local libraries, community centers, especially have children, they'll know where parks at. And also if they have places where Wi-Fi is offer or computer access, this gives you an opportunity to bond with your tenant at that time, but also get them orientated to their new community as well. As you know, moving is stressful for everyone. So imagine what a refugee or other newcomer goes through after they left everything behind. So they're rebuilding their lives. So this will be a good gesture during the orientation by providing them a welcome basket with basic household items or food. Was one way to start a positive landlord-tenant relationship. The gesture is an allowable business expense on your federal income tax, subject to limits. So get with your financial department to see what your limits are in the compliance piece. Due to typical 1 year's lease durations, notice to vacate requirements of the tenant and early termination fees, refugee tenants face hardship when breaking a lease. So having flexible rental agreements. You as a landlord and a housing provider, it can be challenging for refugees. Especially during the migrating process. All this to say, if you as a landlord or a housing provider want to have refugee-friendly operations, offer flexible rental agreements and leases are key. For example, you can offer month-to-month and 6-month leases with minimum termination fees. It makes the property accessible to those who are still migrating and just looking for temporary housing, and it gives them an opportunity to build up their rental history during that short time period with you. And because newcomers have no US credit or employment history, as mentioned, if a promissory note is not enough to get them into the unit, as a landlord or property management company, you can offer the option of a master lease with the resettlement agency. A master lease allows the nonprofit agency to enter a long-term lease agreement with you, the landlord housing provider, to control a block of rental units. With this master lease agreement, the nonprofit assumes unit upkeep and the management responsibilities and guarantees rent payment for those units, and then leases those units back to their clients. So that could be an option going into a master lease agreement with a nonprofit agency. Again, some of these rental practices will not happen overnight, but are a start, an ongoing process that would take time and require the implementation of certain practices and procedures. Well, this concludes this webinar. If you need additional support, please go to our website at www.refugeehousing.org and check out our resources and upcoming trainings. You have a blessed day. Thank you.